Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Everyday Gospel. My name is Randall. I'm the pastor of Grace City, San Diego, and thanks so much for joining us today. The Everyday Gospel are just conversations to help equip you with the gospel for everyday life. And so we have different people that come on and help us to really grow in different areas. And I'm excited to have Jessica Thompson on today because she's been with us before, but just really right now, I think it's such a pivotal time to talk about parenting and specifically parenting through anxious times. The days that we live in, even before the pandemic, it was called the age of anxiety. And I think it really helps us to frame the times that we live in, because it's a very anxious time. And so, like I said, today we have the gift of having Jessica Thompson with us, speaker, author, and we're going to be talking about parenting through anxious times. So good morning, Jessica.
Hi, Randall. Thanks for having me on again. I'm excited to be able to talk to you.
Yeah, it's always great having you on. And I think, even talking with people the last time that you were on, they were like, that was such a blessing. So good. And so,
Well, hopefully I didn't use up all my smart stuff in the first time, and now I'm just out.
no. I think, it's a very important time to talk about this specifically, this topic of parenting through anxious times, because there's so much going on in our nation. There's so much going on in the church. There's so much going on in the home that can really bring a lot of anxiety. And so, again, if you're joining us today, please, in the comment section, make sure that you comment, ask questions for Jessica, because we want to be able to process this together, and we want this to be a conversation. But yeah, Jessica, just to start off, you wrote this book about anxious teens and how we can parent anxious teens. And can you explain a little bit about that book?
Yeah, so obviously wrote it because of what you said at the beginning. We're in this age of anxiety. Anxiety has passed depression as the number one thing that teens go to get therapy for. The statistics are mind-blowing, right? So it's like 1 out of every 5 kids pre-pandemic says that they feel elevated anxiety. And so the reason I wrote this book is because I wanted to see, figure out what is contributing, why this sudden rise in anxiety with our teenagers. And honestly, it's been so interesting. As this book has come out, I've talked to so many parents who have said, I don't even have a teenager, and I'm seeing all of these things in my kids who are younger than those years.
Yeah.
So what is contributing to the elevation of anxiety in our kids' lives? And so as I researched that, I came up with a few ideas, and there's a lot of well-known ideas already out there, some that probably off the top of your head you can just already think of. Why are we feeling so anxious as a people, as a country? It's not just in the US, though, I will say that. I mean, the UK is experiencing the exact same thing. So
Wow.
I was trying to look at what are the things that are contributing to this rise in anxiety.
Yeah. And so, as you talk about different factors that are contributing to anxiety, how does society add to anxiety?
I mean, the society's message to teens, well, to really all of us right now. So if you're feeling elevated anxiety, this might also be to you right now.
Yeah.
Society's message to us is like, we've got a couple different things, right? It's like, be authentic, be vulnerable, but also do amazing things. Speak up about everything. Right? So we've got all these external pressures from society to do all these things. Society, specifically for teens, like if you look at how it's impacting teens, we have this constant barrage of telling teens that just being ordinary or normal isn't enough. right?
Yeah.
You have to be extraordinary, right? If you're just a normal kid with a normal life, that's not okay anymore.
Yeah.
And part of that is social media, right? Like we are comparing
Yeah.
everybody all the time with each other. And so we have this constant barrage of be better, be more. And for instance, take the kids who were in the shooting, the latest huge shooting in Florida. You have this situation where all of these kids have been in this horrific school shooting. And instead of them being allowed to heal, and instead of them being allowed to process their feelings, immediately they're paraded in front of the media. Immediately they're asked for their opinion on gun control. Immediately they're asked for their opinion on whatever. So they're not even allowed to heal. They have to become like change makers. And while a lot of those kids chose that willingly, to an extent, they're still 16 and 17 and brains aren't fully developed. So while they're still choosing those things, there's still so much pressure on kids not to just be an ordinary kid. Like you can't just experience something horrific and not say anything. If you do that, it's not okay. And now listen, I'm not saying that it's wrong for kids to speak up. I want to hear from teens. I hear from my teenagers all the time, and I'm blown away by their perspective at how they see things in different ways than I do. So I'm not saying kids shouldn't or teens shouldn't speak up. I'm just saying there's this new pressure on teenagers to speak up and be change makers. There's also this pressure to go to the right school. And you saw this in the scandal that happened with the college admissions, right? So there's pressure to get into the right school. There's pressure to be a star athlete, which is why parents put their kids in all of these different, like you can't just play Little League anymore. You have to have pitching lessons, hitting lessons on the side, right? Nothing is just for fun or ordinary anymore. Everything is infused with this meaning that if you don't somehow hit this pinnacle of performance in everything you do, you're a loser, and you don't measure up. So society has put this crazy pressure on us. Then you also have, so not just with the college admissions, you also have schools putting tons of pressure on kids to get good grades. There's a lot of good, right, in trying to have your kids excel. But the pressure that is being put on our teens and on our kids to know what college they want to go to by kindergarten or first grade or second grade. I mean, there's a whole host of people who never even went to college who are doing really great right now. Like somehow college has become this goal that maybe 20 years ago, it wasn't like it is now. I mean, there was not pressure to go to college like there is now. You have that pressure. You have this standardized testing that started about 20 years ago. Where, again, there could be some good to standardized testing, but not all kids learn the same way. And when you put this pressure, the government puts pressure on the schools. No Child Left Behind, yes, that's good and right, but the government puts the pressure on the schools to perform in a certain way so that they can get more money. And then the schools put pressure on the teachers to have their kids perform a certain way so that the school can get more money. And then the teachers put this pressure on the kids. And these standardized tests mean nothing for the kids' future, really. I mean, it's just trying to figure out where they are. But you have all these different things, the standardized testing, this pressure to get into college, this pressure to be all you can be and better.
Yeah.
These things weren't around 20 years ago. And so you have social media, right? 24-hour news cycle. These things have all happened in the last 20-ish years. And it's cultivating a atmosphere of anxiety.
Yeah, that's really important to name a lot of what has changed over the past 20, 30 years, because I think at this point, I just kind of think of those things as normal. right? Like
Right.
that's just normal. That's just how life is. And kids should just adjust to it. Parents should just adjust to it. We should just all adjust to it. But that's not the reality, is that we need to name this and say, okay, maybe some of the things that have been added into our lives, it wasn't a healthy thing. It wasn't a
Right.
great thing to
Right.
have. So there's a lot of pressure that you just talked about, society. Now, what about just parents in general? The anxiousness that we carry as parents, and that can really come onto our kids as well. Can you speak to some of that?
Yeah. And I think this is part of um, a gospel issue for parents. This is part of understanding the gospel for your own life. I know and I'm probably not the only one, a lot of times try to use my kids' accomplishments to build my identity.
Hmm.
So I think that somehow if my kids are performing well, that means that I am a good mom.
Yeah.
And that means that I find my righteousness, that's like a Christian word, but I find my okayness, um, I find my own happiness on how my kids perform and what they do. And
Yeah.
so parents put a lot of pressure on their kids to perform in a certain way. And a lot of times we think, oh, I just want them to do well in life. Um, but I think if we look a little deeper, we see that a lot of it is that we want them to do well so that we feel good about ourselves. And Randall,
Mm.
the way that you know that you're doing that is if you get unreasonably angry when they fail to perform in a way that you think they should.
Wow.
Like, okay, yes, if you set
Like,
some
what's
standards.
unreasonably angry? Because I need to know for myself. What does that
Yeah,
mean?
it's that elevated heart rate.
Yeah.
And it may not even come out. It may or may not. It's that
Yeah.
elevated heart rate. It's the elevated feelings of either depression. I'm a horrible parent. I'm never going to be able to get them to do what they're supposed to do, or
Yeah.
anger. They're a horrible kid. What is their
Yeah.
problem?
Right.
It's this sort of othering of our children where we think, I would have never done that. I I never would have done that as a child. That sort of
Yeah.
self-righteous thinking. Yeah, of course you would. You did. And maybe the way you acted as a child isn't the same way your child is acting out, but those heart attitudes were there. And maybe you
Yeah.
just cared more about your parents' opinion and cared more about pleasing them than they do. And
Yeah.
so the heart attitude is still there. If you ever walk in on your kid doing something and you think, I would have never, that's a good place to have a heart check.
Mm.
Um, to really ask yourself, why do I think that? um,
Yeah.
what is it that I am putting on my kid right there? So, parents, when you become unreasonably angry or unreasonably depressed,
Yeah.
um, either one of those is going to be a real tip off that you're placing your identity in how your kids perform
Mm.
versus placing your identity in how Christ performed for you.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
your kids could get an F and a bad grade. And yeah, that's not good. I'm not saying like, hey, that's cool. I'm saying that's not a good thing. You need to talk to them and figure that out with them. But when that happens, what is your response? If it's
That's,
over exaggerated in any way or elevated in any way, then you need to pray and ask God why.
yeah. That's good. Um, so how are you seeing, and I think this kind of goes back to like what you were talking about earlier, like it's affecting the littles, not just the teens.
Yeah.
Um, and so from your research, how have you seen teens dealing with the anxieties that are placed on them, whether it be from society or from parents? Yeah, what are the ways that they're dealing with that?
Well, you have a few different ways, and really it's the same coin, different sides. So you have some kids that become perfectionists and try to do everything exactly right. That's how they're going to control their anxiety. Is
Mhm.
they're going to make sure there's no room for any sort of diversion from what they think should happen. So they will over excel at everything. They will They will over-excel at trying to be perfect. They'll over-excel at their grades, right? All of these things. Now that might sound like, hey, I want that kid.
Yeah.
But those kids end up being completely burnt out by the time they go to college and not even know how to deal with real life.
Yeah.
So often, another thing, like the parents are just they're doing the same thing, controlling everything that their kids do. And then when kids go off to college, they're completely lost and have mental breaks because they have no idea how to live their lives. Parents, a lot of times, like, we want to control we don't want any bad thing to come into their life. Well, this year is just completely blown out of the water, but we don't want any bad thing to come into their life. So if a coach isn't playing them, we go talk to the coach. Or if they get a bad grade, it's the teacher's fault or whatever, right? So then we hyper control their lives. And then they go off to college and they don't know how to do anything without their parents that are advocating for them.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's good for us to have hard things in our lives so that we learn how to live, right? The phrase now is like adult. But it's good for our kids to learn how to walk through adversity without us controlling everything. So kids either become perfectionists, they have mental breaks, like that is happening all the time. They just blow off all sort of responsibility at all. And they're just like, I cannot deal with this. And just go off and do whatever. So, in some ways, like the kid that's a perfectionist, you're like, oh, that seems easier. But that kid, if you talk to, like, the studies that are being done, if you talk to those kids, they are so depressed and they are so anxious. They may look like on the outside they have everything together, but they're not taking care of themselves, staying up all night, studying and trying to get everything done just right and perfectly. And sometimes they get to the point where they're trying to be so perfect, it completely paralyzes them and they literally can't do anything. And so I think that that's how teens are dealing with it. A lot of teens are dealing with that. And so our message as parents has to be, hey, no matter how you perform, you are loved. And no matter what grade you get, obviously we want you to try and apply yourself and learn how to be responsible and faithful in your work. But some kids are just bad at school. And so for us to just say to our kids, no matter how you perform, good or bad, I need you to understand that you are loved by me, that you are loved by God. And that would be their the constant echo they hear in their mind, not be better, be perfect, perform better, make everybody happy. No, what they need to be hearing is rest in what Christ has done for you.
That's good. I think it's easy to look at generations after you and be harder on them. So it's like it's easy for, like, my generation now to look at the generation that's coming up, whether it be Gen Z or even the group that my child would be a part of, and to be harder on them, to say it's like my parents' generation looking at me and saying, well, we walked to school with bare feet, and like we walked through the snow, like you don't even understand. We walked miles to school. And I think it's easy for me too to look at this generation that's coming up and say, well, it was way harder for me. And so why are you struggling so much? How can we be more sensitive to this generation of kids that are growing up right now? That's critical as parents.
Yeah. I mean, I really do think that this generation of kids, while they might have more luxuries, internet, although it is also our downfall, internet, things seem easier. Like I used to have to look up something in the Encyclopedia Britannica, right? So while in some ways we look at these things that are luxuries and we think they have it so easy, I would argue almost that this generation of kids has it harder.
Yeah.
In all these things that we consider luxuries, I think are actually making it harder for our kids to live. I'm not saying the internet is bad. I love it. I'm not saying social media is bad. I love it. I'm saying how we use it, how we've come to depend on it, can make things harder for us and our kids. I think that, like I said, the global pressure that kids are facing to look a certain way, to excel, to be funny, whatever it is, like it used to just be you and your little group of friends, right? That were around you. And now it's like you and the world, and constant comparing. And, we even think, oh, well, there's all these resources. You should be good at things. And that's it's really not how it works. So I would almost argue that I think, and add this last year into it, gosh, I would almost argue that I think that our kids are going through some of the toughest times ever. I think this pandemic and the cultural climate in America, the political climate in America is unbelievable, and so difficult. And we might be like, oh, our kids don't even know what's going on politically. They catch your vibes, though. I will say that. And whether you think, maybe you don't even listen to the news at your house, but you're talking about it. And you're on your phone more trying to research and you're whatever, right? So I think we need to be very aware of what our kids are going through. Who even knows what this last year, especially in California, right, with us being locked down and kids not being able to go to school. What does that do to a kid when everything that they've known up to a certain point is one way and now it's not that way? I am really curious to see how things will be in a few years from now. So listen, even if they did have it super easy and we had it super hard, which is always fun to think, that's like very self-righteous of us. Even if that is true, what does God call us to? Who is God? He's compassionate. If there was ever someone who could be like, I had it hard, get your act together, it's Jesus Christ, who came and lived a sinless life, who never said yes to temptation, who fought every single day of his life to say no to temptation. And if there was ever anyone who could say, I did it right, you should, it was him. But instead, what the Bible says about him and what he says about himself is, I'm gentle and lowly. I'm a high priest who sympathizes with you in your weaknesses. A lot of times we like to just point out our kids' weaknesses to them and be like, what is your problem? And Jesus does not do that with us. He sympathizes with us in our weaknesses. He feels the things we feel. He's gentle with the wayward. This is who Jesus is. And so even if it was true that they have it easier, which I don't think it is, but even if it was, we want to walk as Jesus walked. And how did he walk? Gentle, humble, compassionate, sympathetic. So listen to your kids' worries. Find out why they're anxious. And then come alongside them in that. And that may be you not having all the answers. It may just be you sitting there saying, I'm sorry. This does suck. This is hard. But I know we have a Savior who loves us and is in it with us.
Yeah, that's good. I feel like the times where I just stop and listen to my kids, give them a hug and say, this is really hard right now, and I'm right here with you, are the times where they just melt. They might be just screaming mad, but just if I just come with a gentle tone and say, I'm here for you, I love you, I'm here to listen to you, and through their tears, just give them a hug. It's like everything just kind of melts in that point with them.
It's so hard for us to do that, though, isn't it? I mean,
we got to get over ourselves. It's like because we want to hold on to that righteousness, that self-righteousness of I'm right, you're wrong, get in line. But just like you said, it's not how Jesus has treated us. So how can we treat our kids differently than what we would have naturally done?
Right.
I'm going to ask you the question because I get my 11-year-old who always asks me the question, Dad, when can I get a phone? And, I think that's a pressure too that a number of parents are dealing with as our kids get older because they're seeing their friends. I mean, I think, there's like kindergartners who have phones these days. Obviously, it's different families, different needs, different expectations and stuff. But like when a parent asks you that type of thing, like what do you say? How do you approach that
Yeah.
issue?
Yeah. I mean, again, I do think different families, different kids. And I don't even think I would say our kids all didn't get phones at the same ages. So even in a family, knowing your child and what they can handle and what they can't. It's so easy for us, we want to hear just like a blank, here it is, do this and everything will be fine. That's not how it works, right? So know your kids, know what they can handle. I also think like taking steps to give them that is a good thing, whatever that looks like in your family. So I would never say just give a kid a phone and just be done. That's great. But there's got to be steps that you take working towards that because eventually they will get one, right? And it's good for you to be teaching them about it, teaching them about the goods and the bads, showing them how to use it. Listen, parents, that's tough because are we responsible using ours?
Yeah. It kind of puts the mirror back on us, right? Like, because they'll call us out. Like, hey, I saw you on your phone over there. You're not paying attention to me. Yeah.
So it's very easy for us to be like, oh, parents need to, or kids need to not be on their phones all the time. And like, as we sit there and tweet that out, it's just, it's kind of ridiculous. So, take a long, hard look at yourself first, I would say, and the way you use your phone. And then you will be able to help your child learn how to use theirs. It's just a tool. It's not necessarily bad or good. It's a tool and can be used in a lot of different ways. So I don't have an answer. I think it depends on the maturity of your kid. I think it depends on the willingness of your kid to obey. I think it depends on a lot of different issues. And so I think, this is when it's hard. You need to know your kid and you need to pray about it and you need to be talking to them about it. So if they say, I want a phone, you're not just like, you're too young. And that's that. You're explaining to them why you think it might not be good for them right now.
Yeah. That's good. Have you seen like any of the studies about phones and phone usage and how that's contributing to our anxiety? Is there anything that you can say about that?
Well, for sure. I mean, and like I said before, right? It was the 24-hour news cycle, right? That didn't start until the 90s, around that time. And so you would sit and watch, and now it's like right here. Okay. So you don't have to go and sit and watch the news. You can just look down at it. So that's one thing. Your phone's like this barrage of bad news. I mean, that's all it is, right? And even when it's stuff that's not necessarily bad news, it's like a pretty picture, you're still comparing your own life to that pretty picture, which builds anxiety. So there's this barrage of bad news. There's a barrage of comparing. Obviously, there's the things on the internet that are not good, right? The way that kids, the age that kids are seeing pornography right now is crazy. It's some like 98% of teenage boys, by the time they're 18, 98% have said that they have seen pornographic images. And I had a friend say, and the other 2% are lying. And if you think that that's just a problem with boys, it's something like 65 to 70% of girls have also seen a pornographic image by the time they're 18. So talking to your kids about the dangers of those things, why we don't want to just look at someone for their body, Those kinds of things I think are important.
Yeah, and it's so rampant on any of the social media streams because you might not even be looking for it, and it just pops up in
Right,
front of you.
right, exactly. And that's not necessarily kids searching that kind of stuff out.
No.
That's just what is, like you said, what's infiltrating us. So yeah, I mean, there's so many different things. Again, our phones can be used for good, and
Yeah.
I don't think they're all bad at all. But also, I think we need to be very careful about the dangers of them in our lives. You know, let's be honest right now, parents, in our lives and in
Yeah.
our kids' lives.
Yeah. So how can the church contribute to anxiety for teens and for kids? And
Yeah.
yeah,
So I think that there's this message from the church that, and it is in a lot of youth groups, a lot of traditional youth groups, there's this message that is, be a good Christian. And while that might sound a little harmless, it really isn't. Because the
yeah,
truth of the gospel is, the point is not for you to be a good Christian. The point of the gospel, the point of Christianity is for you to see that you need a savior and fall in
yeah,
love that you have one.
yeah,
So I think there's that message from the church that is not good. And then there's also a message from the church that is, do big things for God. So just like society is saying, do big things, be extraordinary. No one can just be an ordinary teenager anymore. Now you
yeah,
also have the church saying, do big things for God. Like you can't just be a normal kid anywhere.
yeah,
And the Bible actually says, like, our job is to be ordinary clay pots. Our
yeah,
job is to be just faithful where we are. And the point is not to show off what we can do, but the point is for God to indwell us with his story and his presence. And we show off how amazing he is. And
yeah,
so the church's message of, do big things for God, be a good Christian, that teens all the time here when they go to, not all the time, most of the time, when they go to any sort of youth ministry. That's a lot of
yeah,
times the message they're hearing is not the message they need to hear. What they need to hear is, this isn't all about you. This is about
yeah,
a God who comes and forgives and loves screw ups
yeah.
and says, come be a part of my family. You're the one I want.
Mm,
That he accepts us, that he forgives us. That's the message our teens need to hear, not
yeah,
just go be something amazing, because then it's all inward focused. And then
yeah,
if the teen can't do that, they become depressed. Christianity's not for me. Or if the teen can do it, maybe they're one of those like overachiever types, then they become totally prideful. And
yeah.
then it's like, why can't everybody else do it? And then they become like the Pharisees,
Right.
hypocritical, self-righteous, typically angry, that kind of a
Mm,
thing.
yeah. Um, what about the stigma of mental illness
Yeah.
and the church too, and just even the need for a counselor or anything like that that has kind of been pushed to the side, I think, in many ways for churches. We don't talk about mental illness. How can you speak into some of that stuff too? Because
I'm
when
so
we talk
glad
about
you asked
anxiety,
about that,
yeah,
Randall. Listen, if your kid is coming to you saying that they're anxious and it's like something that they constantly deal with, they need to be in therapy.
yeah,
Um, whether that's depending on the severity, and I talk about this in the book, if it's something like your teen can't function for at least 2 weeks, like they need to be in serious therapy. If your teen is telling you, I need help, listen to them. Gosh, parents, listen to them. And don't just try and slap a Bible verse on it and it's going to be all okay. They need to get every type of help that you can give them. And that really, the church does play. I mean, I do talk about that in the book as well. The church has downplayed and dismissed mental illness and has been like, if we just take a Bible verse and slap it on there, everything should be fine. You're not praying enough. You're not trusting enough. Mental illness is real, and we need
yeah,
to avail ourselves of the gifts that God has given us to help with that. And so, and I think that's hard for Christian parents in particular too, to admit that they can't do it all, that they can't be everything for their kid.
Yeah.
Get your kids help. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, my youngest is in therapy. I will just say
Yeah.
that out right now. I have no
Yeah.
problem admitting that. There's no problem admitting that either. Like it's just the way it is right now, and that's so good. So I think being able to talk about that without feeling any shame, being able to encourage one another in that way. So like if you know someone's kid's struggling with anxiety, not being afraid to say, hey, have you thought about therapy?
Yeah.
Instead of like, hey, have you read the Bible? Yes, all those things. We need to, especially if your kid's a Christian, you need to be encouraging them in the word. But your kid might not be a Christian. So you giving them a Bible verse really isn't going to help anything. You should be praying for them, but giving them help to cope with and deal with what they might be going through.
That's good. That's good. So I'm getting some different questions here. And sorry, it's not popping up on my thing here, but I'm looking on my personal page. And one is about just for parents, like how about impatience? She said, I do not call myself a teacher by any means. And in this season, we're in a sense of being called to be teachers, but I can get so impatient when she doesn't understand what I'm saying. And so how can we grow in patience? This can kind of lead us into like, what does the Bible say and how does that encourage us? But what is your...
I mean, I would say there's a couple things. First of all, if your child is not understanding something after you explain it several times, they might have a learning disability.
Yeah.
So that might be good for you to think about and maybe try to pursue and see if that's something that may be going on with them. Okay, that I would say that first of all, that could be something that you need to think about or consider.
Sure.
Another thing is, again, while you may not be able to, you may feel like you're not a good teacher and you're not made for that. And you might not be made for that. Let's be honest.
I think we're all like asked to be, but we're realizing, thank you for teachers. Thank you, Lord, for teachers.
Exactly. So while that may not be what you feel like you're good at, it's not just, you really may not be good at it. So the reason they might not be getting it is because you really might not be good at it. And that's okay. Like you just say to them, I get that this is so hard. This is so difficult for me as well. Can we please be patient with each other? Be patient with me. I learn how to teach, and I'll be patient with you as you learn how to learn. So those are just some practical things, but I think ultimately, remember how Christ has been patient with you.
Yeah.
I mean, that's going to be my answer for everything. Remember how he's been gracious to you. Remember how he's been patient to you. So in the middle of your kid where you think they're actively just trying to be stubborn, you think, gosh, just get it. Remember who Christ is towards you. And there are times you are actively stubborn. You and I are actively stubborn. And he never screams at us, just get it. It's always this posture of, I love you, I forgive you, I welcome you, and I will continue to be patient towards you. And so I think remembering that, and you know what, parents, look, if you're in the middle of teaching them something and they're not getting it, it's cool for you to stop and go outside and take a 5-minute little prayer walk. That's okay. I think a lot of times we get in this rut and we're like, you're going to get this right now. And I'm going to keep working at it till you get it. You know what? Stop. And take a break. Like give yourself a timeout if you feel like you're getting overly angry.
We need timeouts too. Parents need some timeouts.
I mean, like, let's be honest. We really do. So taking the time, or if you're coming into a subject that you know is difficult for your child and for you, taking the time just to stop and pray. God, help us, please. And if that has to be done in between every subject, or It has to be done in between every question. That can be the constant theme of your heart. God, help me, please. God, help me, please. I mean, that posture of dependence is what he's after in us anyway. So this pandemic, even though it's awful and hard, that's one of the things that I've seen more in my life, how desperate I am for him. So in some senses, that's good.
Yeah, there's definitely been, I think, for all of us, a level of humility or posture of humility that we've been hopefully forced to take that position of like, I can't do this. This is really difficult. And just knowing that that we're not alone in that. Because I think there's parents who are feeling that way and might not be willing to acknowledge it because they think, well, I should be better than this, or lean into that self-righteousness. But just knowing that, yeah, we're like, humility is a good thing.
Okay.
It's a good thing to have, and we want our kids to be humble too in that. And I think, kind of like what you said earlier, like being able to explore that maybe there's some challenges that our kids have that maybe we didn't have growing up, or there's some things that make it really hard for them that maybe we're not sensitive to right now, whether that be dyslexia or any of these things that are really challenging for them that we don't see through their eyes. So I think being just ready to check in and say, hey, how's things going? And again, we're not experts in that, but let's bring in some experts that might be able to help with that and say, hey, we're here to help your kids, and this is some of the challenges that they're facing. Because again, they are completely different human beings than us. God's created them. And so we need to be sensitive to what they're going through.
Absolutely.
Really good. So one other question was just, what signs would you look for in your kids that would signal that they were ready to start the process of having their own phone? So the phone thing is back. But like, what are some, like we talked about, like maturity, like what are some signs that you would say are good?
I mean, I think if generally, if your child's responsible, right? You can see how they act with other things. So I would think looking to see how they are with other things, right? Like that whole, if you're faithful with little things, you're going to be faithful with big things. I think asking them why they want a phone, if they can articulate to you what it is, and it's, like those reasons seem reasonable, I think that's good. I think those are a couple good places to start. Or if you think there's a need. Now, before the pandemic, your kids would go and ride bikes or be at someone else's house or whatever. And so there was maybe more of a need, like a practical need in that sense. Whereas before, maybe that's now, like everybody's kind of just with each other all the time. So I think, is there a practical need? Like that was one of the main reasons we gave our kids phones to begin with. It just started out for being when they needed to get picked up from practice. And so, then after that, like you give them a little more time and a little more time. That's kind of how we went about it. So I think, and if your kid is not responsible with things, I think it's good to train them. It's not just like, oh, now you don't get a phone. It would be good to train them to be responsible. So, and I just need to be honest, like, I don't think we did all this right. We are with, like my kids are 20, 22, 20, 17. So that was when kids were first starting to get phones. Like we really did, we were first starting to get phones. We really had no idea what we were getting into. So I think now parents have more of an idea what they're getting into with this whole phone conversation. So Randall, you might be better to answer that question than I am because
I don't know. I'm still a little bitter that I got my first phone at like 19, and I'm like, well, you're going to get your first phone at 19 because that's when I got mine. So yeah, I might not be either. No, but I think that's really good wisdom. And I think the thing that I'm asking from my son, who keeps asking,
Yeah,
is I want to see levels of maturity
yeah,
before I can hand this over to you, because again, there's in discipling them into that. I
yeah,
don't. I think that's really what the way I think about it is, like, I want to
yeah,
disciple him
yeah.
into
It's good.
being ready for it,
Mhm.
because there will be a day when he's going to have one,
Yeah.
um, and I want to make sure that I'm discipling him into that. And so, I think a big one right now that's a challenge, and maybe we can dive into this too a little bit, but it's just video games.
Mhm.
And it's such a big part of their lives right now.
Mhm.
I think that's causing a lot of anxiety as well, because as I start to talk with my son, and I hear him yelling about there's a hacker on here, somebody's, like, uh, I beat that person or whatever. They're already anxious, and so yeah, I think being able to have boundaries with video games. How do you speak about some of that stuff that's really a part of their normal right now? Because now they're
Mhm.
playing with the world. They're playing
Right.
with people all over the country or all over
Yeah.
the world. Where I was playing with my friends in my living room when I was
Yeah.
playing video games, and I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm able to look them eye to eye and we're talking trash back and forth.
Yeah.
But there is accountability there. Now it's like there's no accountability, and you're
Yeah.
talking to somebody and you don't even know their first name.
Right. Yeah. I mean, again, I think we need to teach them about safety all around, right? So, and a lot of that is going to be even teaching them, and like this will go for porn and for video games. Like we're going to be teaching our kids that other people are image bearers. So, how
Mm,
do we treat an image bearer? We don't use them for their body.
yeah.
We and we treat them with kindness and respect. Now, I get it that trash talking during video games, like that's not something I'm really into. Um,
Yeah.
I will trash talk Dodgers fans, though. I will do
Right.
that.
See, it different forms.
Right. Um,
Same symptom.
yeah, but I think it really is. These are just symptoms. These are just ways that plays out. There's deeper things to be teaching your kids.
Right.
Deeper ways that we want to teach them how to interact with people. And so, yeah, I think how do we use your phone to promote that other people are image bearers? And, um, how do we use our phone in a way that loves other people?
Yep.
Um, and so, same with video games. Again, I get that there's like this sense of just trash talking that's fun. And yeah, that's something that I've never sat down and played a video game and talked trash. I don't think. Maybe I
Well,
have.
and my
Um,
my son is telling me, he's like, that's the way I am able to talk to my friends.
yeah, yeah,
That's the only way I can talk to my friends, if I'm on this video game
yeah,
or connecting with them. And so they see it as like this social thing now
yeah,
too. It's got the headset, all that
yeah, yeah.
stuff.
And I do think like, okay, so when your kid gets off video games, um, seeing how his attitude is, does that trash talking like translate into then how he treats you guys?
Yeah.
Well, then that's a problem. Um, so I think watching their behavior, being attuned to their behavior, um, but at the same time, I want to be careful to tell parents, like, we don't always want to be sin sniffing in our kids' lives. We don't always want to be looking for all the wrong things that they're doing. Because look,
Right.
Randall, you nor I want someone doing that in our life either.
Yeah.
Um, and it doesn't promote love for God. So I
Or true
think,
change, I think,
or
even
true
too.
change, absolutely. So I think, um, again, discipling is such a great word. Discipling your kids. So if they do get off video games and they've been trash talking and then they trash talk your wife about her dinner, then I
Yeah.
think it's a good time to say, hey, that's not the way that we're going to do that here. I get that maybe how you guys talk on video games, and but that's got to stop there.
Yeah.
So I think watching the attitudes that bleed over maybe is a good way to do that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It's I've seen that it's another pressure for kids, because there's specific video games that are out there like Fortnite and things like that that he's playing, and it's very competitive.
Mm-hmm.
And then also on top of that, there's kids that don't know how to interact with
Mm-hmm.
another person, and so they're just causing even more friction, and they're kicking them out of this game and that game, and so
Mm-hmm.
it's a really hard thing. And then on top of that, profanity
Mm-hmm.
that's being used, and so um, yeah. Do you have any thoughts on that as far as like just
Yeah, I mean,
language, words? How do
they
you
all
decide?
matter, right? It matters. It's not being just spoken into a void. It really does matter. Now, if you have a group of friends that you're playing with and you all kind of get each other, and that's one thing, right?
Yeah,
But I think it does matter. A language of violence matters.
yeah,
And so, um, yeah, we've had pretty strict rules about language in my house, in this house.
for sure.
So I think it again and again, it's this is just a symptom of how do you think about other people?
Yeah,
Um, how do you promote the well-being of others? How do you promote the flourishing of others?
yeah,
And if that's something that is a value of your house and a value of your family, then I
yeah,
think it would be easy to incorporate that into talking about how you may talk during video games, or without, again, without some sort of overbearing, unreasonable expectation.
yeah,
Uh, I think if the attitude bleeds over into the way that your son treats your other kids, or into the way your son treats you guys, then it might be time for them to step back from video games for a while,
yeah,
or for you to police the way that they talk on video games for a
for
while,
sure.
until they can be responsible in the way that they interact with others.
What I've seen too is it's little idols in the heart, right?
Mm-hmm.
That get there, um, and it plays itself out in that competitiveness.
Mm-hmm.
It also plays itself out in friendships,
Mm-hmm.
or lack of friendships, or and so uh, it's been said in the past, like kids can be mean,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's bled over, and I think as parents we just need to be sensitive to know that that's not just happening now on a school playground. That might
Yeah,
be happening in a bedroom, uh,
absolutely.
where you're not privy to what's happening or what's being spoken. And
Right.
so I think for all parents, being engaged and
Mm-hmm.
also asking questions
Absolutely.
is really important right now for our kids and for their safety,
Yeah.
uh, and for their own, like, just the innocence that I think in
Mm-hmm.
many ways gets taken away from them,
Mm-hmm.
because there might not be boundaries that other kids have, and so they're just kind of diving into whatever, and their parents aren't there.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah,
Yeah. So,
just this age that we live in.
yeah. So two thoughts on that. I think one thing, it might be great for you to sit with your kid while they play video games, and not necessarily just in a "I'm going to watch everything you do" way, but enter into it with them.
Yeah,
Um, I know a lot of people who play with them and their little friend group,
yeah,
dads or moms. I don't want to just say dads, moms who hop in and play on the friend group, so that the friend group knows the parents,
yeah,
uh, so that they hear your voice as well, right?
yeah,
I think that that's a great idea. I think it
yeah,
would be a great way to interact with your kids, to jump in there if they love playing video games and play with them.
yeah,
Another thing that I think we need to be aware of is, how does your kid react, again, after they play video games, or if you tell them they're not allowed to play video games for
yeah,
whatever reason. Those will be two really good indicators of what's going on in their heart. If you say no to something, um, and the reaction, again, we're going to talk about if there's any sort of overreaction, then you know that the video games or whatever it is has taken a place in their heart that it shouldn't. So being
Yep.
aware of those things, but at the
That's
same
good.
time, being aware that you have the same sins going on in your heart, that they need the same forgiveness that you need, need the same love that you need, and then offering that to them.
That's good. Any last thoughts, any scriptures, anything that we can take away from this as parents?
I was just thinking, and we were talking about, when I knew we were going to be talking about just living in anxious times. And I just thought I would read to you out of Luke 12, which, is so good. So I'll just read this, Luke 12. Verse 4, and then I'll skip down. I tell you, my friends, don't fear those who kill the body, and after that have nothing more that they can do. But I will warn you whom to fear. Fear him who, after he's killed you, has authority to cast you into hell. Yes, I tell you, fear him. And then that seems sort of scary. And then it says this, are not 5 sparrows sold for 2 pennies, and not one of them is forgotten before God? Why, even the hairs of your head are all numbered. Fear not. You are of more value than many sparrows. You're not forgotten by God. I think a lot of our anxiety comes from feeling like we're forgotten.
Yeah.
Feeling like things are hopeless, feeling like no one loves us or understands. No one cares about what's going to happen to us. And these verses right here say, oh, every hair on your head is numbered. That's how he's paying attention to you specifically.
Yeah.
He has not forgotten you. And then going down, it says, don't be anxious about your life, what you will eat, or about your body, what will you put on. Listen, I was a little anxious about what I was going to wear for this. So I already broke that. For your life is more than food, and your body more than clothing. Again, look at the birds. I love how God's just so practical with us. Go outside, consider the ravens. They neither sow nor reap. They neither storehouse nor barn. They neither have a storehouse or barn, and yet God feeds them. He takes care of them. And then again, hear how much he loves you. Of how much more value are you than the birds? And of which of you being anxious can add a single day to your life? So funny, right? If then you are not able to do as small things as that, why are you anxious about the rest? Okay, so he's like, go outside and look at the birds. I care if one of them dies. Think about the hair on your head. I know exactly how many are there. And then he says again, go outside and look at the birds. I take care of them. And then he says this, consider the lilies. Go look at some flowers. And he's so practical with us.
That's
How
our
they
timeout
grow.
time, right?
That's right.
That's our
Your
timeout. We need to
time.
do this.
Look at the birds and look at the flowers. So fear not, little flock. It's your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. That's like, there's all this stuff. And he's like, I care about you. It's his good pleasure to give you the kingdom. It's his good pleasure to give you what you need. You don't have to be afraid. He hasn't forgotten you. Are there real things that are making us worried right now? Yeah. But remember that you're not forgotten. Because being worried about something and then having anxiety take over your life, those are 2 different things. He cares about you. If you need to take your little bird and flower walk, go take it. And remember that it's his desire, it's his want, it's his heart to give you the kingdom, to give you more of himself, to give you a life of flourishing. That's what he wants for you. So remember that today.
That's good news. Jessica, can you pray for us as we wrap up today?
Yeah, I'd love to. Father, it's so easy to read this and think, yeah, why would I fear? And then we're going to get 5 minutes away from this conversation and be full of fear that we're not doing it right, or what the news is going to tell us next, or the million things we can worry about right now. Help us to know that you're in this with us, that you've got us, that you're a faithful Father who cares about his flock, who cares about his children. So help us to rest and trust in you today. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Jessica, for being with us.
Of course.
So encouraging. And if people want to check out some of your books or resources, where can they go?
jessicathompson.co. I'm too cool for the M. So just jessicathompson.co. And then on all the socials and again, so cool, I need the Jess LOU.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks again, Jessica.
Thanks, Randall.
Hey, everybody, have a great day. We'll see you next time.
Yeah.